The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents The Fool Hath Published a Psalm Twice. It's true. The Fool hath, in fact, published a psalm twice, and I'll get to that a little later. But we're going to start with a very popular psalm that a lot of atheists are way too familiar with, and yet miss some things, and theists definitely miss some things as well, and that's Psalm 14:1. The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. Now, that's the part that most people have heard of. It's the part that gets fought over. It is basically saying, hey, these atheists are absolutely foolish to reach that conclusion. And there's typical responses from atheists, including me, saying things like, well, my heart pumps blood. It's my brain that doesn't believe that your God exists. But the English translation of H3824 as heart can clearly also be figurative as well, for feelings or will or intellect. It's an amusing response to us to say, my heart pumps blood, it's my brain that does this, but it's also wrong because that's not, the verse isn't talking about a literal heart. I normally say it on the shows when I've said in the past to see what sort of response I'm going to get from the caller because it attests to their knowledge. Some people who call into the various shows have almost no understanding of their holy book that they're going to try to quote. And it's also pretty rare that anybody calls in to just quote Psalm 14:1 to us on any of the shows. But when it does pop up, I give a bad answer, kind of, in that it's not my heart, when I want to see what the caller does and doesn't understand. Because if they can't reply, oh, you don't understand, the word in Hebrew is figurative and it means this and this. If they can't reply to that, then their understanding is also already pretty weak. This is a reminder for everyone, theists and atheists, that the Bible wasn't written in English and your preferred translation is going to be very problematic at points. And if you run around thinking that your understanding of the English version is enough to reach conclusions, you're going to find that you're going to get in trouble more often than not. But that's the first half of the verse. Psalm 14:1 literally begins with, to the chief musician, a psalm of David, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. And then the verse continues and it says, they are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that doeth good. Well, clearly that's not true. I'm an atheist. I'm one of the fools who hath said in my figurative heart, there is no God, or at least I'm not convinced there's a God, however you want to look at it. And yet I've done good things. Or I've done things that any reasonable believer would consider to be good, and things that they would do thinking that they were good, donating to those in need, teaching others, holding a door, being kind, forgiving people. None of these things that may be good are exclusive to theists. So if this verse is to be taken literally and seriously, if it means to say that atheists cannot do anything good, then the Bible is clearly wrong. It is false. It is inaccurate, dishonest, whatever. And I'd say it's also wrong about the foolish part, but that's more debatable than the second part. But what if it's just hyperbole? What if basically the psalmist is just frustrated and exaggerating and saying, oh, these damned atheists, they've said in their heart there is no God, and that's just foolishness, and they're all corrupt and they can't do anything. Well, if they're exaggerating in the song, they're definitely going to continue it. Let's keep going through the rest of Psalm 14. It's only 7 verses. So in verse 2 and 3, it says, the Lord looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand and seek God. They're all gone aside. They are altogether become filthy. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. Okay, so this is about everyone then, right? God looked down from heaven. I don't know how they know this. Maybe he told them. I don't know why he doesn't tell the rest of us. But he looked down from heaven upon the children of men, and they are all corrupt. Except that when we get to verse 4, it says, have all the workers of iniquity no knowledge? Who eat up my people as they eat bread and call not upon the Lord? So hang on. It seems that when God looked down and saw that the children of men were corrupt, it might be in this context contrasted with my people, which would mean that children of men might represent Gentiles, And my people might represent Israelites. But the psalmist uses the phrase elsewhere, children of men phrase elsewhere, to just refer to all humans. So is everyone corrupt and incapable of doing good? Doctrinally, this is easy to agree to. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I'm not perfect, I'm just forgiven. But those are Christian views, and this is a Jewish text that is about Israel's persecution and salvation, not individual salvation. Even when you get all the way down to the end of verse 7, it makes it clear, oh, that the salvation of Israel were come out of Zion when the Lord bringeth back the captivity of his people. Jacob shall rejoice, and Israel shall be glad. This is about Israel, not about individual salvation. But here's the curious part for me. Most people only quote the first half. We've also now addressed the second half of the verse and the rest of the chapter. But there's more, because this whole psalm, in 7 verses or so, is duplicated with only minor changes in Psalm 53. So if you look at Psalm 14:1 and Psalm 53, they are virtually identical. 53 is divided into 6 verses, but it begins, to the chief musician of Mahalath, Maskil, a psalm of David, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God, corrupt are they, they've done abominable things, there's none that doeth good. Verse 2, God looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand, that did seek God. Verse 3, every one of them has gone back, they're altogether become filthy, there's none that doeth good, no, not one. Verse 4, have the workers of iniquity no knowledge, who eat up my people as they eat up bread, they call not on God. It continues on, and verse 6 is, oh, the salvation of Israel will come out of Zion. It is almost a cut and paste, almost word for word, not quite. There are 3 little differences, or around 3 little differences we're talking about. They're different in whether or not they are supposed to be written by David or by someone representing David. Okay, no big deal. They're different in whether they refer to the Lord with the Hebrew word Yahweh or God with the Hebrew Elohim. And they have slightly different endings. Not a big deal, and it doesn't affect the first verse at all, which still basically says, hey, all these non-believers are corrupt. And so the question then becomes, are these maybe different verses of the same hymn or song separated by 38 other unrelated psalms? And so maybe they should have originally been back to back. Like, this is verse 1, although I don't know why you'd need the introduction that this is a psalm from David in both of them. You know, you would think that this would just been written with like 2 stanzas where there's only a slight difference between them, but they're not. So what we have here is a commonly referred to verse that doesn't make any sense and would be false if it were taken literally and seriously. And even if it's hyperbole, I don't know how you could tell that it's hyperbole in a world where there are religious individuals pointing to these verses that would say, yes, everyone is corrupt, or yes, all atheists are corrupt, or that they can do no good, by using a particular interpretation of good, that is, only God can do good, humans cannot do good. All good comes from God. But if you're doing that, is why include a special statement that atheists are the corrupt ones, and yet everybody is? I mean, it's easy doctrinally to do the all have sinned. If everyone is corrupt, it makes about as much sense to start with, oh, those foolish atheists, they're corrupt. And so are the rest of you. Because that's what this psalm does. Oh, those atheists, they're corrupt, they can't do any good thing. And I looked around at the rest of you too, and you're all corrupt and you can't do any good thing. Oh, woe is Israel. But why include that special case against atheists? It's like, I looked at the Gentiles and they're terrible, but you Jews are terrible too. Ha ha ha. The case it makes is still false for the same reason I mentioned before. Some people have done some good, some atheists, some non-Jews, some Jews. There's a capacity to do good. And it happens all the time. But why duplicate the verse? Is this a scribal error? Is this a copy that somebody thought they were quoting David, but they got it a little bit wrong? But if a believer actually believes that any atheist, every atheist alive, has never done anything good, then clearly that's just not true. And the Bible is wrong. And it's wrong twice, because the fool hath published a psalm twice.